YouTube, how's it going? The Goat House is back with my Week 15 NFL Power Rankings update. These every single Tuesday. Been doing these for a while. This might be the most interesting week of Power Rankings yet. You'll find out why. Basically, teams around the same range at the top all lost, and teams around the same range at the bottom all won. So, very interesting stuff. We have full coverage here of the NFL. Next video will be our weekly picks video. We have a recent mock draft up, a recent coach hot seat video up. Check it all out. Like, subscribe to notifications on. Follow us on Twitter. Check out our sponsors, Liquid IV, GLD Shop, jewelry from the GLD Shop giveaway going on down. Links pinned in the comments. Panthers remain at 32. It was another very bad outing for them. They just got an execution problem, so they're remaining at 32. Patriots are at 31, and this was a tough situation with the Patriots and the Commanders. The Patriots actually won this past week against the Steelers. One of their better outings, not saying much. Thought about moving them up, and the Commanders down. Commanders have been playing pretty bad football. They had a bye. It was pretty close for me because the season on the whole, like, even though the Commanders are worse recently, which is debatable, I feel like the Commanders have better moments. They also beat, head-to-head isn't everything, but when it's that close, they do have that going for them there. So, Patriots do win, but unfortunately do not move up at all. Cardinals had a bye and moved down. They are fresh off a win, so it was kind of tough moving them down, but this is the kind of one of the parts, the weird parts of the power rankings this week, just because teams around this range won. The Jets won in dominant fashion against the Texans. You think, that win alone can move them up more, but again, teams around their range also won, also impressed, and that's a start for the Jets. That's one game they were looking like maybe the worst team in football before last week, so can they get something going? If they're on a streak, obviously they'd be higher in this, but there was a pretty impressive win, though, for that defense, and Zach Wilson got things going as well. 27, the Raiders go down 3 spots, drop a donut against the Vikings. You can't do that. And they're starting to lose a bit, starting to come back down to earth after, Antonio Pierce took over. And again, other teams around this range of the rankings won. So if you lost, it was pretty easy to move down, basically. 26, the Chargers are down 5 spots. I mean, Herbert gets hurt. Just a bad outing when he was in, even though it wasn't long. The bad outing for the Chargers while he was in and while he was out. Home game against the Broncos, and you get beat up pretty good. So, and again, other teams on the way up from this range of the power ranking, so they're down 5 spots. The Giants up 2. The Giants have been winning some ball games. Defense playing really well. DeVito, the improvement is surprising and impressive. And they beat the Packers, who were a hot team. So this is a team that, based on what they've been doing, I thought we were going to move them up a little bit more. But other teams right around their spot, their range of the rankings are also on the rise. They're up 2 spots to number 25. The Titans just beat the Dolphins. That was one of the hotter teams in football. They beat them on the road. That's an impressive win, but they end up going up a spot. All these teams kind of getting pushed up a little bit. They're not hopping each other. But the Titans were a little sloppy in that game as well. So they're up 1 spot to number 24. The Bears are up 3 spots. So the Bears are actually a team that did hop teams that won. Because I'm impressed with them. I'm beaten up, dominating a Lions team. Maybe not as good as they once were, but it's still a good Lions team. Either they outplayed them both times they played them. They beat the Vikings last week. The Bears are playing really good on defense. They played very well on offense this past week. Still waiting for them to be a little consistent on offense, game to game, but impressed overall. Really impressed with that defense. Eberflus got that defense playing. So the Bears are making their way up. I actually thought about moving up more. I sat down and thought, are they better than the Saints right now? The Saints game was sloppy against the Panthers, but they did win. It's so close. They do have that head-to-head game against the Bears. Man, the Bears, though, they probably should have beat the Lions the last time. They probably could have got the Saints the last time they played them. The Broncos game, I'm probably missing some other ones in there. So the Bears are actually pretty it's hard to say that, I guess. You can do that for every team, but Bears are kind of close to being higher in these rankings, I guess we'll say. I love the way that defense is playing, but the Saints do get a win. They're up a spot. Bucs get an important win. They're up a spot. Can they put something consistent together to move up more? I thought they should have easily won that Falcons game. The Falcons were dropping like flies, the injuries going into the game as well, but during the game, you know, screen pass interception that led to a touchdown. Like the way things were going, the Bucs it shouldn't have came down to the wire. But at the end of the day, they did win a big, tough game. They are up a spot. Next, there's the Falcons. Falcons moved down a spot. They split on the year, Falcons and Bucs. I still feel like on the year, especially recently, which is a little more important, I do think the Falcons are a little bit better, but they're right next to each other. So I guess the rest of the year will determine who is on top. Tied in record-wise, technically the Bucs lead the division. Again, mainly recently, I feel like the Falcons slightly better, so that was a slight difference. The Bucs should win that game based on how it went, but they do move up a spot. The Steelers go down 2 spots. Yeah, they were without Pickett, but it is what it is. They were pretty bad. And they were against the second worst team in football. Even after the win, the Patriots still the second worst team in football. The highest you can argue is 30 for them. Poorly coached in that game, so they're down 2 spots, 19. They still got a pretty good record. Record really isn't everything, and wins and losses do matter, but it's not going to determine everything in the power rankings. Colts down 5 spots. Yeah, an ugly outing for them. They kind of been getting by in some games, playing an easier schedule, and they play the Bengals. They don't have Joe Burrow, and they just get dominated in this game. I think things kind of bounce their way to get back in the game with that crazy pick 6, and they stall from the rest of the way. They couldn't run the ball, which was surprising because they're pretty good at that. And the Bengals can't stop the run. They just couldn't do anything. And the Bengals, I thought, coasted the victory. So that was a rough loss for the Colts, especially where they were kind of controlling their own destiny for the playoffs. The Vikings up a spot. It's tough because you look at the defensive side. It's like, okay, this was outs. This is the best outing of the year, arguably for a defense. But the offense was so bad, and it's just... This team, relies on the... I mean, maybe not anymore, but Nick Mullins taking over at quarterback, we would think. I guess it hasn't been determined for sure yet. But, it wasn't the prettiest outing, even though I did like the defense. So they're up a spot to number 17. And number 16, the Packers, down 5 spots. Yeah, disappointing loss to the Giants. Very sloppy. Love with the fumble and interception. They had that muffed punt. Well, I guess a fumble. It was muffed and it was recovered. Then Nixon tried to get up, and I don't know, that was bad. And then they give up that big play to Wan'Dale Robinson, which eventually led to losing the game there. The run defense is still pretty bad. Packers would have been lucky, I thought, to win that game because the Saquon it was a huge run to pretty much almost ice the game, and falls and fumbles on his own. So I do think the Packers got outplayed. If they didn't have those uncharacteristic, is it that uncharacteristic though? But if they didn't have those sloppy turnovers, then they probably outplay the Giants. So we'll chalk it up to just that. They play the Bucs this week. I think, maybe the Packers are coming back down to earth a little bit. People are going to realize, yes, you can really run the football on these guys. But I do think we'll talk about that in the picks. I do think the matchup probably favors them against the Bucs, but so they can get back on track as long as they don't turn the ball over like crazy. But that's a tough loss. The Giants with DeVito, I know he's playing better, but still, I mean, they should be one-dimensional. So they're down 5 spots, number 16. So yeah, this is where it was interesting because teams, and we're getting there, but teams last week that were ranked 5 through 13. So every single team 5 through 13 lost this week. So that made this the most interesting power rankings. The bottom part did too, because you want to move the Jets up more. You want to move the Giants up more. You want to move the Titans, the Bears up more. And they moved up, but it's like, the teams in front of them, the Bucs, Saints, the teams in front of those guys have been better than them. It's hard to move these teams up as much as you really, really want to. So it's not really all about what you want. It's kind of what the teams decide in general. But the Packers go down 5 spots. The Seahawks go down 3 spots. I mean, they put up a fight through a little bit of a portion of this game. I still think this is a solid team that's just losing. They're losing right now, and that's why they're moving down. But I do feel like they need to be better. They need to be more consistent. But I do feel like they're a decent team. They're better than teams I have ranked ahead of them. They're just gonna have to win to actually be ahead of them. So it's a tricky situation with the Seahawks. Bengals won in impressive fashion against the Colts, so they're one of the biggest movers of the week. They're up 6 spots. Browning looks pretty good. Mixon and Chase Brown look pretty good. I mean, Jamar Chase has been looking good this game. They didn't really use him a whole lot. They got T. Higgins going. The issue for the Bengals is they don't have Burrow, and their run defense has been bad. Browning's been good, and the run defense was surprisingly locked down in this game. I think it's because they had a good lead mainly, but they played better than they have been playing all year. So I'm impressed. You could argue they're one of the top 7 teams in the AFC, even without Joe Burrow. That's pretty good. If they make the playoffs, I mean, Zach Taylor, Coach of the Year, possibly. That Rams background, Kevin O'Connell from the Vikings, his team's depleted. If they make the playoffs, maybe he makes it so that, and I think the Rams, we're off topic, but McVay, I think, is doing a heck of a job over there too. So that coaching tree is looking pretty good was the point. But Bengals up 6 spots. Very impressed. Browns up 3 spots. Yeah, win against the Jags. The Jags are very sloppy. Lawrence come off that injury. The one thing I don't like is the Browns completely outplayed them. They should have won big, and they let the Jags stay in the game. But small thing there. They made plays on defense. They did enough on offense. And it's a good team they beat. So they're going to move up 3 spots to number 13. They have a pretty damn good record, too, which plays a part. Not a massive part, but they're at 13. Broncos up 2 spots to 12. They beat up the Chargers pretty good. I know Herbert did get hurt. What would have happened if he didn't? Based on how the game was going, I predicted the Broncos to win either way, but I would still think the Broncos would win. But I guess you could say maybe a little fortunate because of that. But they played really good football. Courtland Sutton's been playing well. Russ has been doing enough, except for the end of the Texans game, I suppose, like the very end. That's it. And they continue to make plays on defense. And they have the win against the Browns, which is good, which I don't know if that really determined them being ahead of them. I think, they just been a better team recently. So not more so the head-to-head. Well, I guess if the Browns had the head-to-head, then you could argue who was the better team recently. So maybe it could be flipped. But it's just more so the Broncos have been a better team recently. So splitting up those. So they're at 12. Texans had a disappointing outing against the Jets. I mean, they got dominated. A loss like that, you'd think you move down more than 2 spots. But again, teams ranked from 5 to 13 all lost. And the Texans do have some quality play recently, beating the Broncos. So maybe since that's so close, maybe the very recent head-to-head did come into play a little bit there. But that was a tough loss for the Texans. And Stroud got hurt, but most of the game he was in, but his weapons were depleted, like they were gone too. But it is what it is. They're down 2 spots. Number 10, the Rams are going to stay put. Now, the Rams' record's a little bit different than other teams around this range. They're 6-7. It's one of the best 6-7 teams I've ever seen. The Rams are playing good football. Like, I'm watching the Rams every week, like, since they got healthier, and I'm saying this is a playoff team. This is a good football team. They did lose, but again, teams ranked 5 through 13 all did lose as well. I thought out of those teams, the Rams looked the best out of all those teams that lost, but of course we weren't going to move them up ahead of a lot of those teams because the other teams do have a far, far better record than them, so that's why we really couldn't move the Rams up, but I didn't see any way to drop them. A team did move ahead of them, but the Texans dropped below them because of that bad loss to the Jets. Like I say it again, I hope the Rams make the playoffs because I think they're good enough. I definitely think they're good enough to be in the playoffs. So, but they got to take care of business. They got to close out these games. They had an opportunity to win that game. They couldn't pull it off, but that offense has been looking really good. Number 9, the Jags down 1 spot. This is why this week of Power Ranks was interesting because they lost 2 in a row, 2 games you expect them to win. I mean, Trevor Lawrence was sloppy with the turnovers, and the defense has been poorly coached these last few weeks. But on the year, like looking at the resumes, they're still better than the teams below them, in general, and they got some help because, again, teams that number 5 through number 13 from last week, they all lost. So that they all helped each other by losing. So it is a weird week. Like teams they're really deserving of moving down more. We're unable to move them down more. The Bills are going to go up a whopping 7 spots, and they're able to move up that much because they look good, because they beat the Chiefs, but because a lot of these teams around their range have lost. But the Bills are a good enough team. I know their record isn't the best, but what they show me on the field, like even games they lost, like they showed some pretty good football, like good enough to win. They kind of just choked those games. So kind of the eye test, beating the Chiefs, just looking like a really good football. Like they look like a playoff team as well, and they're gonna have to fight to get in, like really. But I question the coaching of the Bills. That's really the only thing I question. I think they're like Josh Allen is a really good football player. James Cook's really get going. They have weapons everywhere. The defense can make plays. So this is a playoff team. I would say on paper, but on the field as well. But I think coaching is holding them back and maybe some injuries. But I think they're good enough to be in the top 8. They've shown me enough while their teams are just looking bad. So they move up 7 spots. This is where it gets really tricky because the Lions are playing a lot worse. It's a fact. They're not as good as they were earlier. Now, could they turn it around at the right time at the end of the year, the right time? Sure, they can. So we're not going to make a statement on that. But for right now, compared to earlier, they're just not as good as they were. They were hanging around in the top 4 for a bit. They were 1 for a bit then. I mean, they just get crushed by the Bears. Like, just get dominated. And the way they've been playing, yeah, maybe they were fortunate to beat the Saints because how bad the Saints started, and then they lost the Packers before that. Like, they're deserving of moving down a bit. It's just fortunate other teams are looking just as bad and losing as well. Like, I don't know if there's enough there for me to move the Bills up 8 spots with the Lions. The Lions still have a great record, which plays a small part. So as much as you want, like everyone wants me and I want to move the Lions down because how disappointing they are, how disappointing of an outing it is, there just really isn't room to do it. Like, somebody needed to win. The Packers needed to win again, maybe, and is their record good enough? And the Jags needed to win. Yeah, the Bills need to have a better record. I honestly, if the Rams beat the Ravens, and even with 7-6, they're a good enough team for I would have had them ahead of them. You know, I would have had them in the top 6 because they're what they're showing me. And they would have beat the Ravens, but they didn't do that. They didn't close out. 6, the Chiefs. The Chiefs. Pretty disappointing recently. I mean, I know we're going to blame the refs in both those last games, and sure, there's some bad calls. There's some calls at the end of the last game that was the correct call. Yeah, I still think they're a good team, but they're not as good as they were in the past. They're not as good as they were early year. They're starting to lose games. They're not executing. It's just a team you want to move down, but it feels like they're better than the Lions. The Lions are equally as disappointing, and they just got destroyed by the Bears. The Bills, I thought about the Bills, but the Bills got a 1-game win streak. They're choking games. Like, could we move them up 8 or 9 spots? It's tough to do. There's a record difference here as well. So as much as you want to move the Chiefs down, because of what happened this week, you can't really do it. Same thing at number 5. I'd say who had the most pathetic loss of the week. People probably argue the Texans, but they were really, they were dropping like flies throughout that game. I would say the Dolphins, because the Titans we've talked about it. You've seen it. Titans, if we're talking about away teams, Titans are 32nd in the power. If we were to do away power rankings, Titans are 32, no hesitation. They don't have a win away. If you watch them play away, that sums it up. Like, not the record so much. So the Titans were away, went into Miami, basically gifted the Dolphins 21 points. Pick 6 to the defensive lineman. That punt, muff punt, whatever the hell that was, and then touchdown for the Dolphins, and then that botched pitch, touchdown Dolphins. At 21 points for them, and the Titans won the game in Miami. Like that, I know the Dolphins had a situation with Tyreek Hill missing a portion of the game, and that matters. They weren't at full strength. The offensive linemen are out too, but we don't give like passes really. I mean, they didn't move anywhere at the same time, so I guess they did get a pass, but mainly because other teams lost. But it's a bad loss, and it's just like a team like after watching that game, like, God, I need to move the Dolphins down in the power rankings. But I actually thought about the only thing, because we couldn't move them down below the Lions, what they're doing. No, again, we can't move the Bills up 10 spots because of 1 win. The Jags are stinking it up. The Rams that's a tough part. The Rams look better than these teams. I actually think if head-to-head today, like, I don't know about the playoffs where it would have to be Super Bowl against some of those teams. I think the Rams are better than those teams. But winning and losing matters. They're 6-7 right now, so can we move them ahead of them? The Texans just got embarrassed. Broncos lost to the Texans last week. We can't move these teams ahead of the Dolphins, Chiefs, Lions. The only thing I thought of was the Dolphins and the Chiefs, 5 versus 6, because the Chiefs lost to a pretty good team, the Bills, and it came down to the end. The Chiefs also have a head-to-head win against the Dolphins. So I really considered a swap there because the Dolphins' loss was that bad. But I stopped myself because can we really move the Chiefs up a spot with the way they're playing recently, a losing streak that they're on? The Dolphins they were pretty hot before this last 1 loss. So it just couldn't be done. But this was weird. This was the strangest week ever. because the top teams all lost, and they're like, there's some bad losses too. I mean, the Chiefs wasn't an awful loss, but they're putting in a losing streak. The Dolphins, the Lions, ugly loss. The Jags, I think the Dolphins and the Lions uglier loss than the Jags, but the Jags ugly loss, 2 in a row that you expect them to win. Texans, really ugly loss. Packers, it's a bad one for them. Seahawks have a losing streak, but you can see like they're a pretty decent football team still. Weird stuff going on. On to the top 4, the Eagles are down 2 spots. That's 2 in a row they lost, and they got dominated in both those games. So you're going to move down a little bit for, but still a top 4 team on the year. This was somewhat tough, but I went with Ravens staying put at 3. I put the Cowboys up, and we can show number 1 because that was obvious. Cowboys went up 2 spots, number 2. They're playing as good as anyone right there with the Niners. Say the Niners probably the best. I mean, they are the best. Playing as good as anyone. The Ravens, I do think the Rams are a really good team, better than their record. So the Ravens beating them, that's good. They were clutch at the end. They were definitely sloppy. Maybe they were a little fortunate to win. You could argue that either way. If they would have lost, they would have been unfortunate because of the safety. Yeah, so that a very losable game, but they did score a lot of points against a pretty well-coached defense usually. So that was it's like 2A, 2B. I just think the Cowboys a little more impressive recently. So there you have it. I think it's a clear-cut top 3, and it's clear-cut top 4. There was no consideration of the Eagles being lower than 4. But, I mean, I've been doing the power rankings the same way I've been doing them forever. It's my way of doing them, and this is the strangest week ever because you want to move teams, but you can't. And that's why I do like my power rankings, though, because I don't get here like I don't like this team. I don't want to move this team here. You can't do that. Not that I would want to either way. Like pretty much teams decide where they go, but you also have to focus on the teams around them in the rankings and what they do. It's a big 32-piece puzzle is what it is. So, interesting one. We'll see if things kind of get back to normal or what happens this week. We're getting to crunch time, playoff time. So, I'm really excited. I can't wait for our Week 15 picks. Join us for that. We have loads of content here on the channel. Like, subscribe, to notifications on. It's going to do it for this one. Thanks, everyone, for watching. Goodbye.